Hey friends, I'm Daniel Nesbitt, and this is Designing a Sans Serif Typeface. In the last episode, we finished up the pretty much everything here, I think, as far as the lowercase side bearings went. Primarily just going and making sure that everything was set to either an N or an O. For this episode, I actually just went ahead and did the same on my uppercase letters as well. So just jumping over some of these, you can see that I either assigned an H or an O to either side of them. And in the last episode, I think I was having some issues. You can do math with the side bearings, and I figured I would just show you real quick what I mean by that before we dive super into the episode here. So just using a bunch of I's here, I guess we'll throw maybe some H's in there as well. So one of the things you can do if you decide that you don't need the exact number for the side bearing, for example, I've got 100 on each side of this I here. Let's just say, for example, you need to change this up and make it something a little bit different, but you don't want to have to go through and update this should the side bearing value of the H change. And I had been trying to just do something like this, where I do the star thing here to multiply and then do the 0.5, and it wasn't working. As you can see, it gives me a little bit of an error there in the bottom corner. What I discovered was you got to type the equal sign in first, and then you can do your math problems. So in this case, I could do H times 0.5, and then that brings us down to 50. And then if I go through and just pick on one of these other ones here, you can see that it auto updates across there as well. So if you were curious about that, if you had more interest in that, there you go. And I should also add, you can add, multiply, subtract, and divide in this spot as well. You don't necessarily need to do the multiplication. Although particularly I like to do multiplication because sometimes when you're changing these numbers, if you're changing them by any great amount, it's just nicer that it kind of auto updates. So if it needs to go a point one way or the other, it's doing a multiplication of the side bearing that you're doing the math on, rather than a fixed number, like let's say 5 points or something like that, where you might have to go back and adjust that. So hopefully that helps you if you're on your own typeface journey right now. But in the meantime, one of the things that I had mentioned in the last episode was something that really helps when you're designing typeface is that you're actually using words as you're designing that. And so one thing that I was going to bring everybody's attention to here is there is something under the Glyph menu called Word Finder, and I've really been falling in love with this feature. So I'm just going to move this top part out of the way for the moment. But what you'll see is it automatically populated a word here. And if I hit enter, just to kind of keep things neat here a little bit, and hit it again, it'll take a moment here. And what's cool is maybe it won't do it, of course. I'll try one more time here. Oh, now it got all funky on me. So we'll try it this way. So we go under a glyph. There we go, now it's thinking. Basically, you can go through, you can select all the letters you want, and it's just going to come up with a bunch of different text strings, word strings, whatever. And this is really great if you're trying to space your typeface and you want to kind of do this in the app here. So I know everyone's probably excited about things like kerning, because that's just the popular thing to be excited about. But really, the secret to a good typeface is spacing. And if you get the side bearings right, this actually saves you a ton of time when it comes to kerning, because really, kerning is kind of a pain in the butt. You have to go through, and I mean, there are certain characters or strings that everyone knows. For example, if you did the T and the A, or even just some combination of like the V and the W, or sorry, the V and the A. Obviously, we want to get those strings a little bit closer together. So that's something that side bearings are not going to fix for us. But on letters such as like the H or the E or the O and the Q here, where you've got two common shapes that are kind of pointing towards each other and it's not quite creating a huge gap, we can go through and make sure that the side bearings are going to take care of that stuff. So we don't even have to kern those things, which is really the great part about that. There are tricky spots, like I'm going to zoom in here on the A and the I here. And even if I do the A and the H here, I'm just going to throw a couple N's here. So the reason that I do this is I know that the H and the N both have a common face here. So you've got a straight side here and a straight side here, and this is about the space that I want. Now the tricky part with the lowercase a in this instance is because I have this little serif here on the end of it, that actually opens up the spacing a little bit more. So going to where we were at here, I can go through and I can bump that in a little bit, and I think that helps, because originally that was the N. But what I could do is I could also maybe do, let's see, we could do maybe 3/4 of that spacing. And what I'm looking at here is the space, not including down here, but I'm looking at the space here to here and comparing that to here and here. Now it may end up very well being that 40 or some variant of it might work best for that, which is fine if it does. 33, or let's see, I did half there, so half of 65. That probably looks a little bit too close. So pretty much all I'm doing is I'm just kind of dialing in that number there. So now we're at 39. And I think that looks pretty good. So actually, yeah, it was pretty close to 40. And then the nice part is as I'm doing this, I'm just, again, checking side bearings. So how does that side line up with the S? How does it line up with the A, or the C, the J? There's another good example with the K, but again, similar side bearings. 2 A's back to back, how do they look? And I mean, to me, that's looking pretty good. Now, for something like the K, I did use the O as my side bearing for this, because we do have this big chunk here that's missing out of the K. What I'm going to do, just to kind of help me out here a little bit as well, is I'm going to add an H there. So this gives me some comparison. Actually, I'm going to throw an N in there as well, again, because I want some references as to how that's going to work. So actually, probably even do one more there. So what this is doing is this is giving me kind of an idea of what it looks like on this side of the K, this side of the K, so on and so forth. And right now, if I'm looking at this spacing string, that still doesn't look quite right. So again, we're going to do our little math problem here. I'm going to start with half of the width of the O. I'm going to just kind of keep with that circle side bearing. I think that probably works pretty well. That does actually tighten it up pretty good, but I am going to try and bump it just a little bit more. And this may be a situation, just like I was talking about earlier, where I may have to go back and kern this, which is fine. Really what I'm looking at right now is seeing how this side of the K and this side of the K look, because optically I want this to look like that K is sitting right in the middle between these two, the H and the N here. Mathematically, that's not going to be the case, as you're seeing. This is just this pure trick of the eye is all we're after here. And if I need to do a kerning pair, which we can eventually get into probably in a future episode here, but I can do kerning pairs for the lowercase k on the right side for rounded shapes. So this would include things like the A, the O, the D, the Q. You get the idea. And I mean, something like that I think kind of works pretty well. So now that we've got that out of the way, my next question is something similar. So if we go to the X here, and I'm just going to swap those out, and how does that look? Again, I think this probably works okay. I think this might actually feel a little bit looser than the K. So I don't think it's by much though. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do my little math problem here once I get all this typed out. And for this one, I'm going to probably do about half of the O and see where that takes us. So that gets us down to 20. And again, it's what kind of tricks the eye here is you've got this extra space because of course the X is It's got a lot of open space in the middle, right kind of in the middle of the letter there. So just by doing that a little bit, I think that kind of evens it up. If I switch over to something like the V, probably the same deal. But I think what I'm going to do for the V is, rather than go through and type all that out again, I'm going to use the X now as my pair for that. I might even be able to get by with, there we go. It looks like my N got set to 20, which is not what I wanted. There we go. So let's just re-update that. There we are. So make sure I've got all my side bearings correct. I think I do now. So again with the W, I'm just going to go back to that real quick. So we're going to use the X for that. So I think that evens that out pretty well. I am noticing, and this is probably going to be another one of those situations where we might have to look at the kerning pairs, where this portion of the X and that portion of the H here probably could use some kerning as well. For this one, I know this is an H and it's got a straight end on it, but because of how these two meet up, I might actually have a group or something that particularly addresses this kind of letter grouping, where the W and the H, the lowercase n, stuff like that, they might actually just get a separate kerning group as well, just to take care of that. But I think for now we're just going to let that be. But back to the K, I'm actually going to switch this over to the X, just to get some consistency there, because they do have a similar shape, and I think that can be okay like that. The last one that I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop into the Y here. And I actually see now why I was messing that up. But there we go. So that just goes through and pretty well takes care of some of the lowercase letters here. I'm just taking a look real quick. The only other one that I think may play a role, but I don't think so. No, not the R. Okay. But that pretty much takes care of some of the angled letters that we might be having trouble with. And that's, I think, gonna make me pretty happy with lowercase. Let's see what else. I'm just going to go through. We're gonna use the word finder once more here. And I'm just going to give this another look. So again, there's little bits and pieces here and there. Like I said, I think we're probably going to use kerning on that, but the goal in today's episode is really to get as far as I can without even looking or thinking about kerning right now. And I think that probably looks all right. There are things like with the A where I probably could go and make that look a little bit better as far as spacing and all that goes. But I don't think I'm going to go that route. Yeah, I think these are looking decent, at least for now. So jumping over to the uppercase, we're going to go through and do the word finder for this as well. And we'll zoom out a little bit here. And I mean, right now I'm just going to go and see if anything jumps out to me to start. So again, I went through and I've updated this, so like the D, for example, has the rounds on either side. But let's take a look at the Y there. I think that might be a good one to look at. So we're just going to dive into that real quick. And this might be another one that we could perhaps bump in just a little bit more. So we're going to do the equal sign. We're going to multiply the cap O by 0.75. If I get my my stuff right here, there we go. And we're going to do the same on the other side. So equals O star 0.5. or sorry, 0.75, that's what I wanted. There we are. So I'm just kind of moving that in just a little bit, and I'm comparing the Y here, how that feels between the two M's with how the H feels between the two M's, and I think just tightening that up a little bit more helps. And same as before, we're just going to go for the V here, the W, I'm going to do that as well. Once I select the W, we'll just use the Y as that character there. So that, I think, evens that out pretty well. I'm also going to take a look similar to the lowercase and see if I think the same trick works for the K there as well. And then for the X, we'll just go through and do the same there as well. So it just kind of moves it in a little bit more, and I think that might work out pretty well. Immediately your I probably goes right to the WA here. Again, that is really nothing we can do other than aim for a kerning pair on that. There are things like the T and the O that probably could use some help, the A and the V. So there are a few places here that we're going to go back and take care of those with kerning. The other thing too is, so we've got characters like the E where I did set this to the H on both sides, but really the E does have a little bit of an open space here on the right side of it. Probably not to the same length as the X. I think 45 is probably going to get a little too much there. But I do think it is worth exploring moving that in a little bit. So for this one, I'm going to do, we're going to start with 3/4 and see how that works, because I think that would do it. And I mean, kind of at a quick glance, I think that'll work. Now, similar to the E, we've got the F, and I did use the O for that. I think I'm actually going to switch that over to the E. Maybe that kind of works a little bit better. I'm just going to replace the E with the F in a few different places here and see how that feels. I might actually go back to the O on this one. I think that fits in just a tad bit better. I mean, the primary difference is that obviously we lose the bottom bar, so it does have a bit more open space down here. You might argue that it's similar to something like a Y or a V or something of that nature. For the V, I am using the Y for that, so I have a hunch that's going to be too close. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's too close. So we're just going to go back to the O on that and let that be. Again, with the L, I did the same thing here because we have the open space in the opposite direction. I chose to go with the O for that. With the P, this might be one we can kind of get away with doing the Y instead. Just kind of pop that in there and see. I think that actually works a little bit better. I'm not going to do the same for the R because we do have the leg on the R. And I think that fits in pretty well there. So at a glance, at least in this group of letters here, things do seem to be working out pretty well. So I think I'm reasonably happy with that. I am going to go through to just do a quick update on my metrics real quick. And for that, I'm just hitting the command and then the / key, which if you're on a Mac is right above the return key. Just looking at the alphabet here though, this really technically doesn't tell me much with side bearings, because it's, I mean, unless you're typing out the alphabet, you're really never going to see the letters in this kind of order. But I think this is going to work. Yeah, I'm just going to go through. We're going to do one more word finding set here. I'm just kind of hoping that as we shake the letters up here a little bit, maybe there might be something that pops out as we go through this process here. But I mean, honestly, for the most part, as I'm seeing this stuff typed out, I think this works out pretty well. So yeah, I think we're sitting pretty good. So one thing I did want to do here, jumping over real quick, is Jonathan Heffler has some really good resources out there for proofing type, and one of the things that he's really made that's been of extreme value to me personally is text for proofing type. So I can leave a link below in the description for where you can get this copy at, and all I'm doing is I'm just using an Affinity Publisher document open with my font that I've exported out of Glyphs and into here. One of the reasons that we really want to proof letters is because, I mean, let's be honest, when you use a typeface, you're usually using it to type words out. And what's great about this is that if there is anything that I think might be off or wrong, or if there's anything that's going to draw my attention to a problem, it's going to be proofing the letters like this. And this is a really good combination of letters that he's got here, and really quickly at a glance it helps just really see if there's any major issues or glaring issues. So just taking a look here, I'm jumping in real quick, and the first thing I'm doing is I'm just kind of giving this a very, very light passing glance. I'm someone who wears glasses, so my trick here actually is to kind of point my head down a little bit, so I'm looking outside of my glasses a little bit, where everything looks a little bit blurry, if you're able to do that with your eyes. Because what I'm looking for is I'm looking for what we would call like an even color across the page, and I'm not referring to color, but what I'm referring to is if there's a place in this text where I think the letters might be too close together or too far apart, that area is going to look lighter or darker, especially if you're kind of looking at it through a blurred vision a little bit. And so what I mean by that, or what I'm looking for here, I'm just going to zoom in real quick. So the word smuggle here, for the most part, everything is looking pretty well spaced, but immediately what caught my eye was that the two G's here and the L look really close together, and that becomes really obvious. You can see there's a little bit extra space to the side here, and it's even all right in this direction as well, but it seems like a word like that could use some help. So if I jump back over to Glyphs, I'm going to just do it this way. So if we type that out, again, you can see, I mean, right away, and I probably wouldn't have known this had I not looked, but it definitely needs some help. And I think what I'm going to do here to help that out is use the H to kind of open that up a little bit on this side, since it is a pretty straight side to the G here. The other thing that I was looking at was the L. Now, right now I'm using the N for both sides, but as you recall, we had the A where I did a little bit of math trickery here. But what interests me about that is that the L actually has this same shape on the right side of it. So I think what I'm going to do, just popping the L back in there, is to go and use that A to tighten that up. Now, actually, if I go to the I can even do that there as well. So if I back up now, to me that looks a little bit better. So just going back into Affinity here, you can kind of see, again, it's looking pretty snug here, and just backing up a little bit, that's the beauty of proofing text, and it's one of the reasons that it's really, you're encouraged to go through and set up your type this way. And it's one of those things that I kind of learned a little bit late in this series as well. You can obviously go back and see that as I was doing this typeface, I really was going letter by letter through the entire thing, when really I probably should have backed up a little bit and been doing this as soon as I possibly could have. And in future episodes, when we do start doing new typefaces, this is probably something that I'll be jumping into a lot sooner. So if you've made it this far through the series and you haven't started your typeface yet, this is something that I really highly encourage you to do. And this is one of those things where I really could go on and continue to refine this, and I probably will. I'm not going to do everything on camera here per se, but at the very least, this gives you an idea of some of the things that I'm looking at and kind of where I'm looking for the next step to this as far as finishing the typeface up. So I'll be going through and doing this for the lightweight. I probably will be going through and doing this as well for the heavier weight. Because of the difference between the two, I don't really think there is going to be much of a difference in terms of side bearing settings for either one, but it's worth looking at anyway. Sometimes depending on the design of your typeface, you might find that your thinner weights might be a lot different than your thicker weights. It just depends. So I think that's probably going to be a wrap for today's episode. If I do run across anything that I think is really kind of out of bounds of what we talked about here or is worth highlighting, I'll make sure to include that in the next episode. But really, I do like to point out for a lot of people, this is just kind of one of those things where it gets extremely tedious and you can spend a lot of time just doing the side bearings. But again, like I said at the beginning of the episode, the more work we do here, the less we have to do when it comes to kerning, and kerning can take a long, long time. So with that said, if you enjoyed today's episode, by all means make sure to smash that like button. If you haven't, make sure you hit the subscribe button next to my name as well to make sure that you're notified of any new episodes that come out, along with the little bell, because I think YouTube's still doing that. And last but not least, if you have any input, advice, thoughts, questions, comments, you name it, the comment section is always open. We've been having some great conversations over the last few episodes, and I always look forward to connecting with everybody. And, you know, for the most part, just everybody helping everybody learn, because there's always new things to learn when it comes to type. So with that said, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.